weekends, bricks, the Super Bowl, high school dropouts, pornography, exotic luxury, vacation hotels around the world, prostitution, coffee, sugar. What do these things have in common? I suspect that everyone here and listening today has some connection to at least a few of these. Before we can consider how to contribute to solutions to stop human trafficking and make ourselves available to help those victims recover from this kind of trauma, we must ask what part of each of us played, what responsibility do each of us have?
So without knowing all of that backstory, it's hard to answer some of the questions that I was asked. Like what was I thinking in the motel room? Why didn't I run away on the streets or in the motel? So what was I thinking in the motel room? It wasn't very much, except that I was very disappointed. I thought, oh my God, she just wants to use me just like everyone else. Why didn't I run away at the motel? The only thing I can say there is that I already was running away. My decision to run away was very serious. I packed a bag with my favorite pairs of jeans, my favorite music, and pictures of my friends. I had run away before then, but it was always in response to some sort of argument with my parents, and I would just stay overnight somewhere. This was planned out. I didn't tell my friends where I was going, and I was serious. I was going to go to LA and show everyone up that I was going to be somebody. Why didn't I run away when I was on the street? Again, it's hard to understand the answer to this question without hearing all that backstory. The truth is, as I started to work in Atlantic City, initially against my will, I actually began to feel empowered by prostitution. Because before that, I would walk into a room and not know what was going to happen. Or I would engage in sex with an older guy and not really know what it meant. Did this mean I was in a relationship with them? Did this mean it was going to go somewhere? Now I knew it. Everything was on the table. I was going to walk into a room, I was going to have sex, and I was going to get paid for it, and that money was going to help me get to Los Angeles and become somebody. So I actually started to look at the people who lured me away from home and tricked me into running away as my friends. I actually started to view this as a viable option or alternative to high school.
So how do we get cases? Well, we get them through a number of different ways. We get them through random complaints. A neighbor may see something, hear something. We get them through victims, which is very, very rare. It's very rare that a victim will come forward and say that, hey, I am a victim and I need help, but it does happen. We get cases through non-governmental organizations like Sanctuary for Families, Safe Horizons, Restore, GEMS. We get complaints from them as well.
From a law enforcement perspective, you can catch someone with a kilo of cocaine. You can catch someone with a gun. When you see someone with a child or a woman, how do you know that they're involved in human trafficking? It's much harder to see the crime, especially because the crime is done in a way that involves fraud. Nobody goes to no John goes to a place where there is a prostitute and expects her to be crying and saying, I'm being held against my will, I'm coerced. In order for her not to get beat up, in order for her to continue to survive, she has to act like that John is the most wonderful person she's ever met. And not only that, but she has to almost make him believe that she would do it if she wasn't being paid for it. That's the mystique of it. I often feel like I carry every victim on my shoulder because each one of them has suffered things that no one in this country should suffer. We can't have a country that allows slavery. We've said that hundreds of years ago. And yet today, when you walk out of here, when you walk out of your practices, wherever you go, you're going to be seeing people who are still enslaved. And I urge you to open your eyes, take a look, and please help us.
Human trafficking is one of the most monstrous, pervasive, and under-penalized crimes on the planet. And it's carried out by some of the most evil, morally bankrupt people on the planet. People who destroy the lives of innocent girls, women, and boys, and make their existences living hell. I want to really go into one of the questions that keeps coming up because it's very pertinent to what's happening. I have a great speech, but I'm not going to give that speech. You know, you keep saying, why don't they go after the pimps, the traffickers, and the Johns? And I have been working on this issue since 1999. And I want to tell you how horrible it's been. It was first brought to my attention by a not-for-profit called Equality Now that was then headed by a woman who's become a very good friend of mine, Jessica Newworth. And she came to see me and she said, Congresswoman, do you know that one of the biggest prostitution rings and destruction of young girls is taking place in your Queens community? I said, no, tell me about it. And there was an organization called Big Apple Tours that was literally on the internet. They had brochures, they had promotions, and their promotion said, come on a trip to the Philippines or Thailand, and you can have as many young girls as you want, as young as you want, as many as you want. They had photographs, sign up, let's go have fun. So I immediately, and she was trying to stop this, so I immediately wrote Janet Marino. I went to see the DA, DA Brown and other DAs, and Janet Marino wrote back, there's nothing we can do about it because it's not really a crime. I said, how is it not really a crime? It's a crime in our country. It's a crime in their countries. Why is it not a crime?
I encourage you to take what you learned today, continue to draw attention to the formidable problem that we are facing. Weill Cornell is committed to raising awareness about human trafficking, and I hope that you will join us in this endeavor. So thank you very much for being here.
So as I alluded to a little bit, the approach of the clinic is really patient-oriented. Of course, the visits are confidential, and I think what is really important to a lot of the survivors is that they're unaffiliated with the social services group that they're getting their care from. So there may be things that the survivors want to talk about that they haven't necessarily brought up yet with their social worker or with the leaders of the group home in which they're living, or with their lawyer, and that's fine. That I am not affiliated with any of those organizations where they're already seeking care. We start the visit with setting their goals and setting what they describe as their chief concern. These women don't really come in with a chief complaint the way we think of it in medicine. It's not quite so specific for them. It's more that they want to know what their health status is at this point. For a lot of them, they have not been to see a doctor or for a comprehensive exam for the whole time that they've been in the life. And so this is their chance to kind of talk about everything, and we try and pinpoint the major issues or questions that they may have. And then we do a full history and physical, and this is really guided by the patient. I try to do it more as an interview and a storytelling, and less, now we're going to do past medical, now we're going to do past surgical, now, because I don't think that they necessarily think of their medical history in those terms, and I think I actually get a lot more specific details and a lot more truth into how they live their lives and what their health risks may be when we tell it as a narrative, as opposed to having them try and find the medical language to fit into the boxes that I'm used to discussing with patients.
So what is the mental status of the buyer? Well, I've tried to delve into this with some of my clinical experience. So as we know, when a person can use a lot of fantasy, and we call this polymorphous perverse fantasies, which is normal in children and in adults. So you can have as many fantasies as you want, but we don't usually act on those fantasies. And so in some people, fantasy can be used to mitigate behavior, mitigate the need to act on those fantasies. For other people, behavior with a real person is necessary to have the fantasy and feelings, because remember, some of the buyers have also come from very traumatic backgrounds, and this is the only way that they can experience sex.
So some of them are unable to symbolize or use words for their feelings. And then another category is the men who have such perverse or violent fantasies that they can only behave this way with a depersonalized or unreal object.
The young girls maintain the secret out of fear, shame, and intimidation. And for the rest of us, we resist it, as we are traumatized ourselves when exposed to and dealing with the details of the enslavement of these young girls. Consequent temporarily effective coping mechanisms such as passivity, denial, numbing, and dissociation ultimately yield to maladaptive patterns and characterologic mechanisms of defense that impair development and consign these girls to a future of bondage. The seeking for someone who will care, a daddy, a term that pimp often requires her to use, or a family. This is a need that is readily appreciated by the perpetrator.
That brings me to the Super Bowl. This was one of the pieces of information that shook me up a lot. The idea, I think it was Anthony in the FBI speaking at one of these meetings who said that these big mass organizations, concerts, political conventions, and big athletic events like the Super Bowl are occasions of a great deal of trafficking. I had the misfortune to put this out on the listserv of one of my professional organizations, and you would think that I had actually ripped apart the American flag. People's reaction was, the Super Bowl? Football? But those are our guys. You can't do that. And I was actually shocked that this was an intolerable idea in this discussion, that the Super Bowl could be the place of this level of slavery, that it's a site of slavery. How are we going to make sense of this? So I'm a baseball fan, not a football fan, so I'm out to find things wrong with football. And there's of course an enormous movement at the moment. 5 minutes, I promise. To pay attention to the injuries to football players, and there has been an absolute apathy and refusal for owners and for fans to be able to think about that.
So in New York State, until a few weeks ago, if no child, as you know, can consent to sex if she's 17 or under, but if you gave her a $20 bill, then she was criminalized, well, prior to the Safe Harbor Act. And so we aligned the penalties for statutory rapists to the sex traffickers, to the buyers of sex of minors. Sex trafficking is an affirmative defense to prostitution, which is critically important for the advocates. And you can read on with civil remedies and developing protocols to increase law enforcement's awareness. But more importantly, in the New York Penal Code, the term prostitute is the only term that defines a quote-unquote criminal. You don't say a robber, you don't say a thief, you don't say a murderer, but somehow we say prostitute. And so a highly, highly stigmatizing word, and so we are thrilled to announce that now it will be replaced for person for prostitution. When people tell me that women choose this life, I can't help but laugh. Do they know how many women like me have tried to escape but have been beaten back black and blue when they are caught? To the men who buy us, we are like meat. To everyone else in society, we simply do not exist. So the reason why this quote is so powerful is that we are now at the cusp of seeing, and here are a few survivor-led organizations, survivors who are not just telling their stories anymore, but survivors who are starting their own organizations, who are at the table with policymakers and legislators, who are really informing us. Anyone who does grassroots activism, you know that the solutions are at the grassroots. They are at the fingertips of the people who have suffered these abuses. And so it is critical for us to honor survivors' voices, to ensure that they do have all of the resources to help us really develop and implement the best policies that we can on exploitation in the sex trade.